All right, and we're live. So, welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely and hybrid. And today on the line, you longtime listeners have been hearing about him for years on the opening of every podcast. And finally, this year, I decided he would be first, my first guest. And it's Abe Heward from Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, welcome, welcome. I am so happy to have you on the podcast in
Hello,
particular.
thanks for having me. I'm actually really honored to be a guest, so thank you.
Well, you're actually even a listener, so that even
Yes.
so that even makes me even more proud. But in any case, I'm having you on the podcast not just because you're my friend, but also because I was visiting you in Phoenix, Arizona over the holidays, and we got to talking about your work and your job, and that your company was going hybrid, and that some things were going well and some things were not going well at all. And I got super curious, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. This is a typical story that I hear. It would be super interesting to dive in on the podcast and talk about it because I think a lot of companies are in the exact same situation that you are. And so this is a relatable story. So let's dive in like I do with all my guests. And I know you're prepared for the opening question, but I do want to know, what does your virtual office look like and what do you need in order to get your work done?
Yeah. Well, this was the cheeky answer, and I thought of this. The cheeky answer is, what do I need to get my work done? Is really just a laptop and my mind, right? Yeah. but but really, since I write code, working on a small screen is nearly impossible because you have multiple things you need to be referencing whenever you're writing things. So working on a laptop feels claustrophobic. So two most important things that I have in my remote office are very large monitors so that I can have multiple things up at the screen and be referencing things all in one fell swoop. Um, and you had asked, I think you wanted to know what the difference is at my office at my job. The I do have multiple monitors there, but the monitor quality isn't as good, and that's a source of pain. But we'll get to that later on, I think. But I'll stick with the home office. So the other thing I need to get done is having a nice microphone. As I don't know if you have viewers, they can see that I've got this very nice microphone on a boom. Um, the reason why I like this is because I can keep it in front of my face whenever I'm moving around and keep my mouth very close to it. I use a pair of headphones that are wired directly into the microphone so that I can hear myself and hear the quality of my own voice. One of the things that does for me is it keeps me from feeling like I have to yell. And since I can hear myself, I know exactly how I sound. That allows me to stay relaxed in my voice. If I start having to yell, I used to have a mic where I couldn't hear myself and I just was always yelling. And that was just, I don't think that was very good for my own stress level or for the people who were listening on the other end. I have a standing desk, which I very rarely use for standing, but it's available in case I need to do that. Getting kind of lazy, so, but and then I have a separate webcam that I have mounted off of my desk so that the camera doesn't shake. If I ever bump my desk, the camera doesn't move. So that's very nice. Um, yeah, that feels very much like a tech head kind of an answer, but that's what I am. The thing is, since I've been working remotely for so very, very long, as you know, Lisette, you kind of get to where you've dialed in exactly what you need for being able to be as efficient and as comfortable as possible. The chair is also another thing you have to be very, very
Yeah.
selective of and be willing to invest in. Having a crappy chair leads to just not feeling comfortable. So everything that I buy and think about, it's really, how am I increasing my comfort in my space here? Because I'm spending a lot of time on it. And I want to be able to focus on the work and be as effective as I can in that, and not being worried like the princess and the pea, feeling that pea and not feeling comfortable,
It becomes a source of distraction. I think that's the problem with it.
That's
Is it's
exactly
just
right.
like, oh yeah, that thing again. Oh yeah, that
Hmm.
thing again.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
indeed.
right. Yeah.
And if you're going to be doing real work at home, especially if you're going to do programming and something that you're really having to sit at the laptop a lot, then I think the key is to make oneself very comfortable. There were a lot of people at the beginning of the pandemic hunched over their kitchen tables on, kitchen table chairs, which are fine for a meal, but not good long term. And it's
Yeah.
just
Not for
like,
an 8-hour day. Exactly.
right, right. It's just not a great working environment. So for those of us that have the luxury of having our own offices, but the equipment, I think it's very purposeful. Your microphone that you have, it keeps your voice relaxed. So
Yeah.
it's for you and for the other person, and you can hear yourself, so you know if something's going wrong with the sound quality.
Correct. Yeah.
So yeah, it might seem over the top to some people. On the other hand, these are the things that make us comfortable online. So
Yeah.
just think about what we need.
When I first got the mic, and obviously doing a lot of Zooms with people who I'd been Zooming with, for months beforehand, every comment, every single person made the same jokes like, oh, I feel like I'm on a podcast now.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it looks over the top, right? And
Yeah,
it sits on the desk. On the other hand, I think having it on a boon like that makes it so that you can put it out of the way when needed, which is also
that is
very nice. You just,
exactly right. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. As soon as I'm off of it, I stick it off to the side. It's not a thing that's sitting on my desk in my way, which was exactly what the other microphone was. It was a microphone that was always taking up space on my desk. And it's just like, okay, how many of these things are just little inconveniences that just add up over time? It's like when you're trying to be a super lightweight backpacker, every single ounce that you're putting into that backpack is going to contribute to whether you're comfortable on the hike or not. So you have to think about every little thing, and it all adds up to being an extremely comfortable place where you can actually get into states of flow and do really effective work.
right, right. I love it. I've always said that. It was always the little things that add up to one big comfortable environment. That's always been the thing. So, whether you take your lighting seriously or your sound or whatever it is, it could just be like people make fun, like, oh, it's just another gadget. But indeed, it's not just that. There's more to it than that.
Exactly.
I want to dive into the situation at your company. And where I'd like to start is to talk about how you were working before the pandemic. And maybe as we're talking about how you worked before the pandemic, it'll come out like not what kind of company it is specifically, but in terms of like, you have people all over the United States, or is it global, or, that kind of thing. But before the
Yeah.
pandemic, what was the work situation?
Yeah. I'll keep it vague. the the company's based in Phoenix, but its primary market is in Georgia, and so you would think that, and it's a nationwide company. It's just expanded across the entire United States. So you would think they would be okay with working remotely, right? But the CEO and CTO were both adamantly opposed to it. If you were a developer in the Phoenix market, you had to come into the office, which struck me as uh, rather strange, because even on my team, when I first started, there was somebody who was 100% remote. And the reason why was because she was a part of a company that our company had purchased and had kept on a number of those people. And she lived in the Boston area. And so obviously she's going to be 100% remote. So every single meeting that we had that was a stand up or whatever it was, we would be in a room, and there was a giant screen with a Zoom camera, and we would Zoom for the meetings, any meetings that we had. And that's the other thing about the company that was strange, was that there were Zoom capable rooms, offices all across the headquarters. Nearly every meeting room had a Zoom capable television and microphone. And so there were obvious concessions to people who worked remotely. And there were multiple other people who worked remotely. But if you were in the Phoenix area, you had to come into the office. And Thankfully I was only 15 minutes away, so it wasn't too bad of a commute for me. So, I acquiesced to it.
Were there common rumblings about this at the company, or was it just accepted? Like if you were hired here, people just came to the office. Did it come
Yeah.
up at all, or was it just accepted?
Well, as you might imagine, I was a strong advocate for for allowing remote work, and would bring it
Sure,
up.
but but if you're getting hired at a place and they say that at our company we don't do this, then
Yeah.
you've sort of there's also an acceptance and a responsibility on the employee's part to accept the terms where
Well,
you're
yeah, of
hired, right?
course. Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, so I wasn't like, agitating for allowing remote. I was just advocating.
Right,
So
right, right, right,
there's a
right,
bit of
right.
a
There's a
difference.
difference. But were other people, or what was the culture like?
There were a few other people who were on board with it, who had remote work experience. A lot of people were more traditional, though. Oh, I like coming to the office and socializing, blah blah blah. It's like, and my thought, whenever people would say that, it's like, we don't come into the office to socialize. We come in the office to get work done. And if you're coming into the office to hang out in the lunchroom with your best friend, uh, I'm going to start questioning your work ethic. Because that's
Right,
that's how that comes across to me. It's like, does the company want me to be effective, or do they want me to come in and socialize? Because it just seems like they want me to be effective. That's why I'm being paid.
right. Why did you want to work remotely?
Um, well, okay. Part of it is because I'm pretty strongly introverted and don't mind being alone. In fact, I enjoy being alone most of the time. Um, Also because I do take my work seriously, and when I'm in the office, I feel like I should be focusing on doing the work and getting things done. Um, I think those are the primary reasons. Again, also because I can make my work environment at home exactly how I want it to be.
Right. But I take it, I mean, I know you and you do like the socializing aspect of it. I mean, there is a nice part of that of being at the office. So it's
Oh,
not, I
sure.
mean,
Yeah.
if you had your preferences, would you go into the office sometimes, or would you do it totally remote? What would your ideal, like say beyond any company, what's your ideal working scenario?
Yeah. So I think ideally, let's call it 99% remote.
Okay.
um, but I wouldn't be opposed to one day a week, if they allowed it to be one day a week mostly, and you could pick the day of the week that you wanted to come in, and it'd be the sort of thing where it's like, okay, I would come in on those days when the team had decided, or maybe even sub parts of the team had decided, we're going to come in and work on this specific thing, and then
Right.
go out to lunch and do team builders or whatever it is. That's the ideal situation, I think, at
Right.
least
Right.
for
Right.
me.
Right. So the
Obviously that's not everybody's ideal situation, but I recognize that. So
No, totally. I'm just trying to get an idea of like the ideal versus yeah, versus the reality. So then
yeah.
before the pandemic, then you're working at a company where they've got some remote people, they're set up for remote, but mostly it's in person. Now,
Correct. Yeah.
during the pandemic, what happened?
Oh yeah. So the pandemic hits, and it was kind of a mad scramble, and sort of miraculous how it happened, because we somehow pulled off in like a day or two the company going to 100% remote. Um,
Wow.
I I credit the DevOps team for doing that, because they set up the VPN, they set up all of the things. There were hiccups here and there, but um, as long as people, had their home office somewhat set up, they could get in and um, get to the code that we needed to get to Slack, which was our communication tool, which we would already had been using as a team. Um, so, I mean, it was a fairly seamless process. I mean, it was literally overnight. We're 100% remote. Everybody's working from home 100% of the time. And one of the first things that happened after probably 2 or 3 months of doing it, both the CEO and the CTO, uh, they admitted that they were kind of surprised and floored by how much more productive as a development team the engineers all were. They said it out loud. Clearly, working from home works. Uh, and so, I thought, okay, cool. We won this war. They've totally bought into this notion of remote work is cool. And we worked remotely for a good 18 months or something before people started feeling more comfortable about coming back into the office. And then at that time, of course, the CTO is like, yeah, I miss everybody. I miss coming into the office and seeing everybody. And so they said, we're going to start having people come in 2 days a week. And they picked the 2 days, and they said, rather than saying you guys can pick which 2 days, they said the 2 days we're coming in are going to be Mondays and Thursdays, and you must be in the office.
Huh.
The interesting thing was that they weren't very vigilant about enforcing this. And so I would say that a good portion of that time was most people came in once a week and nobody said anything, because everybody who was an engineer, and that included the team leads who were engineers, everybody had recognized, because it was abundantly clear that we were much more productive at home. And you could focus. When you asked questions, you asked them asynchronously in Slack, and so you weren't bothering anybody. If you needed to do pair programming, you could do it via Zoom and share your screen, and everybody loved it. And so, when people, there were, obviously there were people who really loved to come into the office, and they would say so. A lot of times when people would say, coming to the office sounds great, there was a lot of rumblings of people who disagreed. But the company was adamant, and they mandated the 2 times a week. And
The leaders
for
do it?
oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were there on Mondays and Thursdays.
So I can't say they did it 100% of the time. Obviously, I mean, the company is big enough, and the space that we were in was big enough that I wouldn't always see them, but that's because they may be on a different floor on the other side of the building. And
Right.
so, so I, and I certainly wasn't keeping tabs on that, but
we can
what I
presume
was,
so though.
yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, it became sort of a joke the number of times that people would come into the office and end up having to Zoom while at the office. Like, oh, why did I come into the office if we're now doing our stand-up meeting via Zoom rather than all of us coming into one of the offices that were Zoom capable? Just absurd things would happen for many weeks. And because of that, most of the time people were not very there wasn't a vigilant enforcement of coming into the office. Oh, the other thing is that the part of the office that we were assigned to come in, we were assigned desks, was right next to a pickleball court, and people would play pickleball while I'm trying to work.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it was, and yeah, I mean, and so you hear the pickleball hitting the court, and this is an office with, like, the walls are glass. The ceiling it doesn't have any ceiling tiles. It's just the bare ceiling with the mechanicals for the air conditioner. And so the sound is just echoing everywhere. You feel like you're in a stadium of pickleball players. It's just, what are we doing here? It's crazy. So yeah, there wasn't a real enforcement of coming in 2 days a week for a while, but that changed recently.
Okay. And so you were working on this unenforced 2 days a week where some
Yeah.
people were doing it, some people were not. What changed recently?
Yeah. So they decided, and I'm not, so one of the things that happened is that, the things at the company aren't going well. And so they decided we're going to consolidate some of the offices because they had been in the midst of a buying spree for years and buying real estate, buying offices, hiring tons of people to put them in offices. That all went away recently. And so suddenly there's all this excess office space. And so they're going to consolidate us all into one office, which is still two buildings and multiple floors, which I'll come back to later. But they consolidate us and they said, because we're all going to be we're all going to be in those offices. We want everybody to come in 3 times a week to maximally utilize this space. And I'm sure they had other reasons. I mean, the reasons just sort of, they boggle my mind, so I don't remember them. It'll make sense to me. But the point is that we're all coming to the same pair of buildings, and now it's Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And if you don't do it, unlike before, now there's more of a shaming of those people who aren't coming in. And there's a bit of a public shaming, like gentle and not so gentle reminders that, hey, we're supposed to be coming into the office. Unless you have a good excuse, like, I'm sick, or, there still are a number of acceptable excuses, most are revolving around kids, which I don't have. So unfortunately, that's not a ready excuse for myself.
Right.
But other people who say, I've got to take my kid to the doctor or whatever, they're still not coming in very often. Oh, and before I get to the comment about the office thing, I also want to mention that as a part of the restructuring and downsizing that happened recently, they went to a number of people before they announced this. Starting January 1st, everybody's coming in 3 days a week. They went to a number of people who they knew lived with like 45-minute commute one way away from the headquarters. And they said to them that they would be okay with if they, and I may be mischaracterizing this. So this is slightly wrong. Let's just assume I'm slightly wrong on how this went down, but I want to bring it up. They said, would you be willing to take a severance package if you want to stay with the company? Then if you're willing to stay with the company, we'll let you still only come in 2 days a week because we know you're 45 minutes away, or because there's layoffs happening, we'll give you a severance package. We recognize that maybe you don't want to come in 3 days a week. And so there are still a number of people who they'll only come in 2 days a week because they have a long commute. Yeah, and more power to them. I'm happy for them. But it just seems odd that they would be willing to do that for some people and not others. So the bit about the office thing, since we're in 2 buildings and we're multiple floors, that still sort of feels remote to me because I'm remote from all of the people who are in the other building, right? I may still have to Zoom with a few people who are on a totally different floor.
Right.
The other thing is that we still end up Zooming often from our desks because a lot of times the meeting rooms are all full up. And so there isn't a Zoom room available. Or even a non-capable Zoom room, because still on any given day, at least one person is still remote. So we still have to Zoom with them. And
Right.
it's just like, what is the point of all? It's just absurdity on top of absurdity.
It sounds like a Monty Python skit from this perspective, which is totally why I wanted to talk to you on the podcast.
Yeah.
No, but I do think a lot of people can relate. And here is a company, I mean, we have to presume that the company wants to do the right thing, and
Yeah.
that these are people that have good intentions and are doing their best.
Yeah.
So from one perspective, from leadership's perspective, they're really trying to motivate people to come back into the office. Now, the techniques and the tactics that they're using it sounds to me like going completely against motivation. It is
Yeah.
not moving in the motivation direction. It is moving towards the demotivation direction because the rules seem absurd.
Yeah.
And if
In fact, that reminds me, we had a retro recently, which spanned across the point in time when we went from 2 days a week to 3 days a week. And there was a card on the retro that said, and I'm going to paraphrase. I don't remember exactly what the wording was. It was something along the lines of 3 days a week coming into the office is not great. I mean, that was the gist of it, right? And on the board software we use, people can put thumbs up or thumbs downs on cards and make comments. There were 15 thumbs ups on that card, and there's only 14 people on the team. So
That's so yeah, people feel strongly about this.
yes,
So
absolutely.
I think what's interesting, if I can, if we look back to before the pandemic, it was definitely just more accepted that you were coming into the office. And now, I think what's changed is people are really questioning why do I need to come into the office? What is the value, both for me, but also for the company? Like we can
Right.
assume the company wants productivity as well. So if it's working against that, then we really need to take a look at that. But what does an employee do in this situation? Right. I mean, that is the big question, right?
That
It's
is
not
the
like
big
the
question.
employees
Yeah.
can rise up and, what are you going to do? So the big question is, what do employees do? I think most people look for other jobs,
Yeah.
right? Or like a lot of, so some people, I don't know, most, some people look for other jobs. Some people they follow the rules and express their dislike during retrospectives. That's another thing. Uh, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
And then there's the quiet protests of coming up with different excuses for why you're not coming into the office. I think you just kind of work through each of the. I'm sick today. Oh, I've got a doctor's appointment today. Oh, I've got to take my kid to the doctor. Oh, I've got to take my pet to the vet. Or any of number of things. The sick one tends to work because nobody wants you to come into the office and spread your sickness around. But when we're not in flu season, it's a little less of a ready excuse, obviously. But
Right.
and eventually these kinds of things run out, and you end up risking the public shaming of, oh, you're supposed to come into the office.
Right.
But yeah, beyond that, I think just it feels like what we're dealing with is people at the top who just have this almost religious belief that somehow there's going to be magic happening at the water cooler because when we're all co-located. And the problem is that they seem to be impervious to any data that would contradict that narrative. And the data is just massive that says that that's not how it works. And if rather than mandating us to come into the office 2 days a week, treating us like adults and saying, you guys decide when it's going to work for you guys to come into the office. That kind of a concession to a recognition that we are adults who can make good decisions for the company, that would go a long way to improving the morale of the team. Hey, you guys are adults. You can make this decision on our own. We trust that you have the company's interests in mind when you're making these choices. I don't know how. I can tell you that kind of a statement to people would pay huge dividends, especially in the situation we're in now, where the entire company, their morale is not exactly high because of the recent layoffs and stuff that's been going on. So,
Right. Right. And I can imagine. Well, and also it's not like you're going into this having to do future experiments about does it work. We've had a big experiment that
yeah,
showed that it did work and that people were capable of it. So then, if we can presume that these are smart people, then the real question becomes why, like, why is this really, I guess what you did just mention that they have this sort of religious feeling that the important things happen with serendipity at the water cooler and that we must be co-located in order for that magic to happen. And
yeah,
indeed, magic does happen in these serendipitous moments
yeah. I'm definitely not
sometimes.
denying that. Yeah,
Right, sometimes, but
it's a
all
question of
bets are off.
cost. Right. It's a
Right.
question of, it's like you're spending a whole lot of energy and time and money, frankly, because time is money, hoping that somehow that's going to pay off because somebody will have some serendipitous event happen. Um, and it's hard to make a case for that, I think, really, because it may happen, it may not happen. It's hard to quantify that kind of thing.
Well, indeed. And one of the things that I like to promote is providing in a true hybrid environment, providing a multimodal way of team building. So having regular events in person that people can go to if they want to, and then having regular events online, like virtual coffees or just getting to know people using apps like Donut to introduce each other to, like making opportunities available in different ways for the people that want to use them in different ways. Like I might not want to go out to lunch. Like it would take a half a day for me to go out to lunch. But like a virtual lunch, virtual coffee, no problem. Like that's way less of a cost for me to do that. So, I'd love that.
Right.
I can
Oh,
think of also, yeah, go ahead.
there's one there. I just want to mention one other argument that typically gets made is that you guys should come into the office because it's true you work a job that allows you to work from home, but there are other people at the company who have to come into the office, and so you should, in solidarity with them, come into the office. And that argument, I think we need to really kill that argument, because that argument doesn't work, and here's why. Um, let's say that we worked in a company where some of the workers had to wear hazmat suits. All right, should we all be expected to wear hazmat suits because we need to be in solidarity with those people who their job requires them to wear a hazmat suit, and so we expect them to wear a hazmat suit? My job doesn't require me to wear a hazmat suit, so I think if I was told you must wear a hazmat suit, I'd be like, well, this is crazy. Just because what, they feel bad because my job doesn't involve a hazmat suit? This isn't it, it's the same sort of thing. If if I'm being asked to be less productive, to be in solidarity with a totally different job, the logic doesn't play there. It just doesn't make any sense. And I want to put a stop to people trying to make that argument successfully, because it just doesn't work.
Well, I think we can all recognize that some jobs can be done remotely and some jobs cannot.
That's
And
correct.
that,
Yeah,
right, we can have equal benefits but different benefits
exactly.
for each type. Right. And also there's plenty of people that love working at the office. I'm all about choice. It's always been about choice. And I think that that's the whole, I think that's the whole argument that I find confusing, that people don't just latch on to, is just some people do want to be there. So like, let's set up the environment for them to be there. And some people just want to
Correct.
come in every once in a while. Let's set up that. I mean, it's not that hard to set up that environment instead of these mandates, which seem to really be pushing against like, they seem so difficult to push against the grain. But anyway, I digress. So the last thing before we go, and we'll end pretty soon, is I do want to talk about team building
Yeah,
and how did that work? Let's talk about before, during, and now. I would love to hear how team building has changed, if that's okay with you. Like
sure.
before the pandemic, did people go out regularly? What kind of team building events were common?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we were all co-located, I have to say that the original office was, it was huge. Oh, it was trendy kind of thing, open plan, which meant that when you're in the office, you kind of have to wear noise canceling headphones because otherwise the noise is crazy. But nice lunch area where you could go and just hang and chat with your teammates and talk with people who are on other teams and get to know people that way. So from that perspective, the team camaraderie was pretty tight, with a few events here and there that were offsite, going to Top Golf or um, I think Top Golf was probably the most common thing that would be the team builder, but there were other places where you go, and I'd heard of like escape rooms and things like that. Your traditional kind of team builders,
Yeah.
um, and of course, happy hours after work at the nearest bar or whatever. Um, those are fairly common. Obviously, that kind of stuff didn't happen during the pandemic. I think that mostly the team builders were um, weekly meetings, weekly Zoom meetings with with the whole team, and obviously stand-ups every day with opportunities for people to chat before and after that. And typically one of the things that became fairly common was end of week, like late afternoon, we would schedule a couple of hours to play the online games. I forget the names of them, but they're the silly games where you try to solve a murder, or you're given a bunch of trivia questions, and or you have to draw. One of my favorites actually is it's like a telephone thing where you draw a picture, or you say a phrase, somebody has to draw the phrase, and then the next person has to say the phrase that the picture reminds them of, and then the person after that draws another picture, then there's another phrase, and so you then compare the first phrase with the last phrase, and then all the pictures in the middle. It's just this hilarious just mess. It's awesome. So those were the kind of, and you do that with the whole team, and everybody joins into that and is a part of that. And oh man, so much fun. So yeah, those were during the pandemic kind of things. And then after, we've kind of come back around to happy hours and Top Golf.
All right. And I'm assuming attendance is different now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not as but it's hard to characterize that as an issue having specifically to do with the fact that we're back in the office more, versus just the fact that there are other issues with the company right now that I think a lot of people are. So it's hard to really say that that's due to the change in attendance requirements.
Right. Indeed. 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 Not everything is attributed to hybrid work. There's a whole other
Right.
things coming into play here. Indeed.
Yes.
No, but I think what the things to highlight is that the mandates don't really work.
Yeah.
And we've known that, but it's just good to, I mean, you have such a solid story, so it's good that I wanted to have that be told. The mandates don't seem to be working. People are willing to come in. Some people really want to come in, but the bottom line is people want to decide for themselves what's going to work and what's not going to work. But most people want to do right by the company. I mean, that's what we did during the pandemic. That's what you guys did during the pandemic. So
Yep.
to close us out, we'll do two short questions to close us out. One is, what is your advice for other companies who are doing this? Like
Hmm.
general advice for other company owners out there who are also mandating days per week, but with all the best intentions, we've got to assume.
So yeah, so are you saying that my advice to those people who are making the decision, or the people who are being victimized by the decision, or both?
No, I wouldn't say, I mean, it's like I would say that you are in the position of, let's not call it victimized, but
Yeah.
you're working under these conditions. These are
Yeah.
the conditions that everybody's accepted. So maybe for both, one for
Yes.
each,
Right. So I
if you
think,
have one.
yeah, no, I think really, maybe I'm repeating myself here. I think what I would ask you, if you are a person who has the power of making this decision for your company, is think about whether or not you want to treat your employees as adults, and whether or not you trust them enough to have the best interests of the company and the productivity of the company at heart. Um, and if you, I would assume that you could say, yes, I think they're all adults and they have the best interests. So then think very hard about why you're not treating them like adults. Because that's how it comes across to them if you're mandating that they come in on particular days. As for the other side, for people who are in the position that I'm in, where we're subject to these decisions, I guess the only advice I have is to keep advocating for being treated like an adult. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you can make people understand that the way that the mandates come across it's infantilizing, then I think we'll ultimately win this battle.
Right. Right. So trust your employees to be the professionals you hired them to be is really the bottom
Exactly.
line. Yeah. I think that's a great note to end on. Last then question is, Abe, if people want to know more about you, where's the best place to find you?
Ah, yes. Well, I to be quite honest, I don't use social media. I mean, I do have accounts, but I'm very rarely on them. I try to stay off of Twitter as much as possible, just because I'm not a fan of doom scrolling. I stay off of Facebook, primarily because I recognized in myself that looking at other people's curated life stories just doesn't add to my happiness. And so
Right.
I moved off of that. And so if somebody really, really wants to get a hold of me, then I would have them contact you, and then you can be a conduit to chatting with me. And look, if somebody actually really does want to talk to me, I'm all for that. That sounds, I mean, if I've somehow connected with you enough that you want to reach out to me, then please do that.
Right. And do
I
it through
invite and
me.
encourage that. Yeah,
I would love
through
it.
Lisette, please. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll do that. And Abe is probably the only person in the world that I would do this for, besides my husband. let's let's put that caveat on. So awesome. So Abe, thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience. I feel like it's very relatable, and I hope that my audience can really appreciate um, like what the mandates do and what the effect that they have on the workforce. And if you're out there and you're suffering, you want to do something about it, then we have to show the value of working in this new way of working. And with that, thanks everybody for listening. And until next time, be powerful.